Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to my Takeout, my Emil Amok's Takeout. I talk in my closet to you, the public, about the news, stuff that's happened to me, stuff in my life, stuff that you can relate to if you're an Asian American. We call it WDAAT. What does an Asian American think? Although you don't have to be Asian American. Later on, we'll have Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez, Professor Emeritus, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, Asian American Studies, Filipino American Studies professor. Have him on talking about the news of the day, the big news, Israel, Iran. It's bumped everything out of the spotlight, and I guess that means all the domestic stuff that everyone was hot about, the Padilla, the Alex Padilla episode with Christy Nome at her press conference. That was big on the news yesterday before all this. What happened to Padilla? We'll talk about that. The ongoing LA, let's call it, they're not riots. They're the LA ice raids and the public response to the LA ice raids. And you might say, oh, come on, Emil, there are paid protesters. Oh, sure. Well, and they may be doing the problems or doing the disruptive violence. Don't know. But it's a mix of people protesting, and generally speaking, it's a public protest. So let's just say it's this is don't call them riots, call them the LA ICE raids and the public response. That's the most accurate, the most fair. And so we'll talk about that. I think we're entering what the sixth day, and with Israel and all the other stuff, maybe they're not as important. I don't know. We don't see them on the news as much. So maybe to some people it won't be as important. We'll also talk about the judges. I guess this is where the chess checkers thing comes up. You know, one person makes a move, check. You make a move with the military. Here's a check with the district judge. Here's a check with the appellate court. Here's a check with the. Well, you run out if you reach, say, the Supreme Court. So, where are we in terms of that decision there on LA? We'll talk about the parade tomorrow, the military parade, the 250th anniversary or birthday of the Army. It's Trump's birthday. It's also my father's death day by coincidence, which makes it a weird day for me. So, I'll talk about that. We'll bring up Professor Dan. Before I do, just one word on the WSOC, the World Series of Comedy, which I was a part of yesterday at Laughs Unlimited. Great club. You know, a lot of people, when they think of comedy in Sacramento, they might think of the Punchline, which is a good club. I like the Punchline. Great club. But the other club in essentially the entertainment district of Sacramento, old Sacramento, is Laughs Unlimited. And if you haven't been there recently, you can go there for the World Series of Comedy. It's going on till Saturday. And then there are other comics who are there throughout the, just regularly. And it's a great club. It's not too big. It's not too small. It's very airy. It's a great space. And I've only done, I did a mic there a couple months ago. It was a small mic. But I went to two good-sized crowds, Wednesday and Thursday. Good. I'll tell you, I'll go right to the point. I didn't make it through the second round. I made it through the first round. Then the second round, I had a tactical error, and I did not finish in the top two that those people advanced. So tonight Friday night, there's 18 comics, and then two comics, the top two in each group of 9, go and face off on Saturday, and then the top 3 are in the final Saturday night. It's fun. And as I was saying yesterday to people, if you're a comedian, it's a way to say, hey, I'm a comedian. I'm in this competition with other comedians. We're doing shows. People are there. The public is there. You're a comedian. Now, are you making Kevin Hart money? No. Are you making popcorn stand money at Kevin Hart? Kevin Hart shows. No, but you're doing it. As they say, you're living the dream. If your dream was to do stand-up comedy, and for everyone who says, come on, stand-up, yeah. Well, then dare them to do an open mic and see how easy it is. And then they'll shut up, and then you'll say, yeah, I guess that's something. Whether it's the World Series of Comedy or people just independently going out to clubs and doing their thing. The one thing about the World Series of Comedy, it's a franchise that other comedians created to develop and help other comics who are on the road or want to be on the road. And they tour around the country. They tour from, the East Coast to the Midwest to the West Coast, and then they have their finals in Las Vegas. And it really is a fun way to be a part of a comedian or a comic community. And you go to a few of these and, you start seeing the same people and you say, wow, I'm part of a community. So World Series of Comedy tonight, the another round. I'm not in this. I'm out of it now. But Friday night, 2 rounds at 7 and I think 9:30, and then tomorrow the semifinals and then the finals. World Series of Comedy at Laughs Unlimited in Sacramento, Old Town, or Old Sacramento, they call it. For tickets, go to VIPtickethub.com/unlimited tickets. Tell them I sent you, even though I won't be there, but you're curious. You want to see what this is, and you get discount tickets. So do that. Do that. You'll have fun, and you'll say, God, it was for a night of comedy at an Old Sac. It was fun. And then there's all those places where you get, T-shirts and taffy, and there's bars and saloons and Old Sacramento. It's a fun place. Anyway, Old Sac tonight for World Series of Comedy. Laughs Unlimited. I'm not going to be there, but great comic lineup. The competition is still on. The World Series of Comedy tonight. All right, so let's talk about the news. And the big news, of course, is Israel and Iran. We'll talk about Padilla, Senator Padilla, and Trump and the LA, what's happening in LA, and the parade coming up tomorrow. But then we bring up Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University. Professor Emeritus. We've talked about these global conflicts before. Israel strikes last night. It was they've been planning for it for years, or not years, but they've been planning on it for a long time. And apparently Donald Trump knew about it, but Marco Rubio says, the public face of the United States, is that Israel acted alone. But so Israel wiped out some nuclear capability of Iran. The people who were head of their nuclear scientists all targeted, all dead. And what kind of pickle does this put the United States? Are we out of it, or are we drawn into this now, Dan?
We're drawn in. We're drawn in, and all it comes down to is how we react. I found it interesting that I got some reports from military movement coverage online, and it seems to be reliable. But I suspected that a telltale would be whether there were any troop movements, and especially naval movements in the Eastern Mediterranean, in advance of what we learned about, which was the attack by Israel on Iran. And there were movements that began 3 days ago, uh, almost 4 days ago now.
This
And
is Israel troop movement.
no, American naval
American.
movements.
So the Americans knew about it.
in the Eastern Mediterranean. Well, we've got naval and particularly aircraft and some destroyer uh, deployment in that area generally, and so they can easily move towards that coast. And so, what most analysts believe is that that was done uh, to support Israel in terms of their Iron Dome defense.
Mhm.
Uh, so what that means is there was an anticipation, one, of the attack,
Yeah.
and we were aware of that possibility. Okay, Trump himself said it's possible.
Yeah. He
Okay, and
confirmed.
now
Yeah.
he said it, and so clearly the military movement was consistent with his prior knowledge. Now, then, if he
But
had prior
wait a
knowledge,
minute. But can you say that? Because he's saying that the U.S. had no
nothing to
military
do with this,
involvement.
right? We weren't playing, and that's what I'm questioning.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm questioning. I think I think there was a dark deal. That means done in camera, right?
Mhm.
And that was you go ahead and yes, attack Iran, okay, but you accept full responsibility, okay, and keep us out of it. But we'll back you up. So
Yeah.
we'll give you whatever support you need, but you're on your own in terms of committing this attack and whatever happens after that. Now,
Yeah.
what is Israel commitment to the United States? And is it okay? You get to continue your purge of Palestinians, and now the term genocide, I think, comes fully into play.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
because of the way Israel continues to push in Palestine. I'm sorry, the Palestinians in Gaza. Okay, in what they say is their effort to completely rid uh, Gaza of Hamas, and that's it. There's no way that you can completely rid Gaza of Hamas. Okay, there's always going to be some remnant of Hamas there. There's always going to be the possibility they'll be able to reconstitute. Okay, so what Israel is really saying is we're going to wipe out the Palestinians. We're going to move them out of Gaza. I don't know where they're going to try and put them. They're starving children. They're continuing their campaign against unarmed civilians, and
And,
so now they've opened up literally two fronts, and they did that when they remember when they attacked Hezbollah,
yeah.
right?
Well,
And in
but-
Lebanon,
yeah. But
yeah,
what you're saying though is Trump gave them approval to do this.
yes.
So there should be some ownership by the U.S., even though Trump is saying, hey, we knew about it, but there's no military
Well, but
involvement.
it isn't public ownership, and of course the Republican Party is going to deny it.
No.
There are some Democrats that support the fact that Israel attacked Iran because it takes the weight off the United States in terms of the responsibility of committing some sort of belligerent action towards Iran rather than offering the table, right? Because we were supposed to Witkoff was supposed to be there
This
making a
weekend.
deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was supposed to. We're supposed to meet in Oman. What's today? Friday. They were supposed to meet on Sunday. So I don't know if the U.S. designee is going to go at this point, and this really does give an advantage to the United States in the sense that depending on how weakened uh, Iran is in terms of its military response, particularly its ballistic missile response. And I was really surprised at their initial response with just drones.
Well,
Uh,
the
that
response
was
is known. There's like 22 people killed and more, at least that, and more people injured. The retaliation over Tel Aviv is on. So
yeah,
I
and
think it's just
there's
the
been a
first strike.
so-called second wave, and they used ballistic missiles, but that was, I think, a couple hit the ground, but with U.S. support, their defense, the Israeli defense, has been very effective.
Yeah. So now, what gets me a couple things. Israel said that it had been planning this, and they had planned 14 days of operations. So, well, I mean, that's a signal to somebody. Hey, this is temporary. Go to the table. Go to the table to negotiate. Trump in social media said, we all should go back and negotiate a peace. Is that where this is headed, or are we? Is it going to get worse? So you mentioned genocide a few minutes ago, that it was almost like a green light for Israel to do whatever it wants,
Yes,
but not peace.
not peace.
I
Um,
mean, because that's
it,
how Trump is playing it up publicly. Hey, we're going for peace. We need a deal. We need. I told you to have a deal. We're going to get a deal. Now let's go to the table. It's Mr. Trump, the big peacemaker, which I think is kind of baloney, but that's how the public face of it is. How should people really see it?
well, see, unfortunately, there's so much going on
Yeah.
that I think the general American public is overwhelmed, and
Yeah,
they
I
don't
think
really
so.
know where to look. You know, these kinds of issues, I don't think they're paying as strict attention to this matter and how this Israeli attack and the Iranian response are likely to affect us,
Right.
domestically. That's over there, right? And it's distant. And I think the general American public really doesn't pay much attention to this stuff until some of our guys, our personnel, and when I say guys, I don't just mean to be
Yeah.
men, our military personnel get injured or killed.
Yeah.
Then they start paying attention. Then they think, this has gotten serious, and then they start blaming people left and right. If the Democrats hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't be in this position,
Yeah.
right? They ignore the reality that there was a deal, that it was an effective deal. That the United States was one of the parties that was reviewing the work of the Iranians on enrichment, right?
Yeah.
Of
And guess who
fissionable
pulled out?
material.
And guess who pulled out of that deal?
Yeah, and Trump,
Donald Trump,
killed the
2018.
deal. That was
That,
one of the biggest things of his first administration was he
yeah.
killed that deal. And
And
so, yeah, everybody should have been worried about the fact that that gave the green light to the Iranians to continue their enrichment program.
yeah. And so whenever you hear people say the JCPOA,
Hmm.
that's the joint comprehensive plan of action, the JCPOA. You hear people
Also
drop
known as
it.
the Obama Iran deal.
Right. The Iran Obama nuclear deal. And and of course, because it had something to do with Obama and Trump didn't do it, Trump pulled out in 2018. So here's where we are now, 2018, fast forward to 2025, Israel or someone, who's minding the store discovers that Iran has violated some of the agreements, and that was reason why this that set up this provocation that we see now. And what gets me is, here's Trump social media saying, "Come on, let's get to the table, let's have a deal." And even prior to uh, the meeting this weekend that was supposed to happen, he was saying, "Let's get a deal. I'm going to give you 60 hours or whatever." He gave
Yeah,
a timeline,
yeah.
and then nothing happened, and so now there's cover, there's excuse for Israel to do what it did. What I'm getting at is, if there is a deal, we are not likely to get even a deal that is as good as what Obama put
Okay.
together.
100%.
The
100%.
JCPOA, we're not going to get even as good a deal as that. And
Yep.
so here's Trump doing his chaos nonsense, from 2018, canceling the JCPOA, the Iran deal. And look at what it gets us. Nothing. This is what happens when you have a guy like Trump who knows nothing in charge of something as important as world peace, as
He
nuclear.
knew next to nothing the first time around, but what he had were some competent people as advisors.
Yeah.
Now all he's got is incompetent yes people, okay, and some competent people who are very, very antagonistic to anyone who seems superior or is trying to assert their superiority. Excuse me, to the United States in terms of world power. And so you've got people like Stephen Miller, making
Yeah.
domestic policy and influencing the attitude towards foreign policy. Okay, who does he have? Okay, Rubio is just sounding like a defense man, right? All he's doing is rationalizing what Trump's already done. So everything that they're doing is ex post facto, right? He does something and then they rationalize it to the public. Okay,
This is yeah.
that's not a plan. That's not foreign policy.
This is what happens when you have a government led by inexperienced people who know nothing, who shouldn't be in these jobs. And when what they do the best is they pull the wool over the public's eyes and they get people to say, oh, yeah, let Trump do it. And as you were pointing out earlier, I don't think the United States, that you know, the public is really aware of everything that's going on, about what's happening. They know it's over there. And until it really strikes home, I mean, certainly people who are involved in the Palestinian and Israeli, debates, you know, the Gaza debate, for the last, since October, they're into it. They understand. But the public in general, I don't think it was like a shock to find out that Israel had attacked the Iran nuclear sites. And
And yeah,
so,
I've been asked. I've been asked by some folks, why now? And I said it's pretty obvious. Trump wanted to have this meeting. He sent emissaries to have meetings, and they're supposed to meet in Oman on Sunday. And
right.
so the timing was exactly to interfere with that process. Okay. And what does that show? I think if we take it a step further, does that show that Netanyahu respects Trump, or that he thinks that Trump could be effective in actually achieving a negotiated deal with Iran? That's not the kind of language that Netanyahu has used to rationalize this attack. The language he has used is they've been building towards the capability to wipe out Israel,
Yeah.
okay, with a single barrage of nuclear weapons. And Israel is a relatively small geographic space, and so yes, they could, with a few ballistic missiles, nuclear armed, they could wipe out Israel. Okay, that's that's true. It's also true that that's been the stated goal, right, of
Right.
Iran since at
Yeah.
least 1979.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
we're approaching 50 years.
and the only thing that has kept it from happening is, are these these efforts toward peace, these peace talks, that but but by competent people who know how to manage these discussions. Right now, I don't know, like you said, we said earlier, where's the plan here?
Yep.
Where's the plan from Trump?
Yeah.
And Witkoff is
He's
like,
he's he's just a reactionary fool sitting on the sidelines
yeah.
while Netanyahu manipulates the entire situation.
And some would,
The EU and NATO is just standing there, okay,
yeah.
aghast and concerned, but unable to do anything really seriously.
Well, when you find essentially the leader of the free world involved in this, if you're France, Germany, England, what do? You got to take your cues from Trump, unfortunately, and Trump doesn't know. And Trump, this is what happens when stuff happens in the world, and we got someone like Donald Trump in there.
Right on. But how do we get there? How did we get there? And it isn't only about Trump, right? This is an ongoing problem.
Right?
People,
It's about the American public. We don't care.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I was at a big public thing, and I asked how many people read a newspaper today. No one raised their hands.
You're kidding.
I
Was this very recently?
Yeah, well, it was a comedy show, so
Mhm.
those are
Yeah.
escapists anyway. But
Mhm.
I was inserting some news things. People didn't care. I mean, the idea is that most people don't go to the news. They'd rather get their news through late night comedy or people like Jon Stewart or John Oliver.
Mhm.
So there's still a kind of market for political talk or political comedy. They just don't want it. They don't want to be that serious about it. So they want it with a spoonful of sugar, and then they don't care. Then they say, well, then let's let the leaders take care of that. And then when stuff really happens and they get mad, then you have things like the protests that are happening around the country this weekend against Trump. And then you have things like the protests against the LA ice raids in LA. But they're they're really grassroots type of things that when you put them all together, they seem like, oh, this is what the people in the United States are thinking, but they're not nearly as united. They're not. They're all grassroots type of things, all strung together. And uh, this is our country. This is our country now versus some kind of strong national force. We can't even. The Democrats can't even put together a strong national stance against Trump. So.
And there
And now
are
they're together. Now Israel's pulling them together, right? Schumer's saying, there can't be any space between us. We have to be strong in our defense of Israel, right?
yeah, yeah, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
I
that's
mean,
a problem.
how do you get around that problem? Schumer says commitment to Israel must be ironclad. You know,
Well, this is one of the reasons that younger generation people that do are a little more conscious of this, especially those that are willing to identify Israeli policy towards the Palestinians as genocide.
yeah,
They rather than quibble over whether or not the term genocide fits in real terms, okay, whether or not it's fair, you have to look at the behavior of Israeli politicians and all of their dignitaries and even their diplomats, right?
mm,
They're all united behind this movement, and it means the wiping out of Palestinians living in Gaza. Okay, so uh, they're very sensitive to this. They're correct in seeing this stuff as not only inhumane, okay, but it is
yeah,
genocidal, okay.
yeah,
So just because the rest of the world is unwilling to use that term, and see, the irony of it is, of course, that the people who suffered one of the greatest genocides in human history, right, were Jewish people, right, and
right.
so the Israelis claimed that history. Okay. And yet they act in a manner that's consistent with the perpetrators of the genocide against themselves. They're acting in a manner that is very imitative of exactly the Nazi principles and pattern of practice against them, including the killing of 6 million people. And that doesn't even include other people who are associated with being Jews that also were killed. You can add another 2 or 3 million people to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just. So how do we get out of this? How do we? We wait. I mean, Israel's planning 14 days of action, uh, and
We're
and
we're we're
it's
we have to stand side. I said earlier, Trump is just a bystander. Okay, and so we will be further drawn in because we're going to have to defend them. Okay, and so it
yeah,
comes down to whether or not Iran is going to use much stronger attacks, and I'm really concerned now. I mean, it's a good thing they don't have, or at least we believed that they don't have the ability to use nuclear devices. But what
yeah,
if they go to their allies? Okay, does
right,
North Korea have the capability? And are they allied with Iran?
yeah. And look, and in the meantime, you still have Ukraine and Russia happening, and then you have all the domestic stuff in the United States.
Yeah,
And
isn't it interesting? They say there's no connection between the Israeli plan where they they smuggled missiles and drones into Iran, okay, and then
yeah,
used the intelligence of based on the military actions of Mossad, right, inside Iran, okay, to get very clear and accurate information on the location of the
yeah.
top three military leaders, right, and they killed them, okay, outright. They
See,
also took out a couple of scientists, okay,
right,
and so they did all of this stuff with several months planning, right? And everybody said, "Gee, this parallels what the Ukrainians did to Russia." Okay, And my statement was not quite, because the Israelis were willing to go to civilian locations to get their targets.
Yeah.
The
And,
Ukrainians only attacked military targets. Okay.
and look at how incredible what Israel was able to do in the name of war. They can't do what's
In the name of
incredible
peace.
in the name of peace, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
peace is like is just you can't wrap your arms around it. It's just elusive. But
It's
war,
cultural. For Israelis, it's cultural.
yeah,
They have, ever since their beginning, they have been surrounded on all sides, right, by the enemy.
yeah,
Okay. They've been able to make peace at times with some of those people. The Jordanians were the earliest, right, that they made peace with. They had a tentative peace with the Lebanese. And then, because of the Six-Day War, what, almost 60 years ago at this point, right, um, they were eventually able to make peace with Egypt. But then what was the local response to that, right? The assassination of the people who made the deals, right?
yeah,
On both sides, on all sides, right?
yeah.
Egyptian,
Yeah.
Palestinian, and Israeli, right?
Oh, war is a motivator. War is productive. War is what they know. I mean, if it
Well,
were,
but we don't know that. See, the
yeah,
point that we both made is that the American public doesn't know that. They don't know they aren't concerned with the history of the making of peace accords, right?
yeah,
It was a big deal when it happened, right? It was during
if that,
Carter.
yeah, if that, but now you're mentioning the word that everyone sort of wants to move away from. That they don't want to know about the history. They don't want to know about the history in America. They don't know. The
Yeah,
American public doesn't
correct,
know about what's going on in America. You could talk
correct.
about the Philippine American War, known as U.S. Philippines War. Yeah, what is that? Is that
Yep.
and it's just ridiculous.
Well, and,
So
and what you're reflecting on is that Filipinos themselves
yeah.
find that difficult,
Well,
and
tell me.
I think they ignore it as well. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, it's easier to ignore than to really, get into it and understand and gain insight from the past. But how about Asian Americans? I mean, since we talk about Asian Americans on this show, Filipinos, other Asian Americans, I mean, we're all worried about this. I mean, this is one of those stories that draws us all in as Americans. But I guess it really boils down to your stance on Israel and Palestine. Huh?
I think it's world consciousness. I think one of your really good friends,
Mm,
from Oakland, who helped so many Asian American writers
mm.
uh, get published, right?
Yeah.
And he's a playwright. He's got a play up right now,
Oh yeah, my good friend. Yes.
and he is an example of what we need in terms of cultural leadership in American society.
Well, yeah, you're talking about the
Ishmael Reed.
the great writer Ishmael Reed. But notice how Trump comes in and he gets rid of DEI and everything
Exactly.
adjacent to it, including multiculturalism, including diversity.
Well,
Well, diversity is right there.
my point is there a cultural leader that is the equivalent of Ishmael Reed, right?
Yeah.
That the public is familiar with, that they're aware of. Okay. Now,
I don't think
when
any
yeah,
culture,
when
any race, Asian,
sure,
Latino. I
who does the right have? Does the right have a William F. Buckley?
no, but they have Joe Rogan.
There you go. There
Yeah,
you go. This is what American society has been reduced to. And that's
yeah,
why we're so vulnerable. Because it's not only the younger men, very influenced by Joe Rogan, right? The
yeah,
younger men.
yeah,
Um, and obviously he's white, but
yeah.
he often takes down the whiteness a little bit, right? And does talk about the condition of people of color. Sometimes he does do that. And so he has the credibility of at least being willing to discuss those things. Okay. But is there anyone of the intellectual status of William F. Buckley? Okay,
No,
is there
zero.
anyone on the left of the intellectual status of either Foucault or Vidal? Okay, or Chomsky, who's still alive now? Okay,
Well,
is there
I
anybody of that level besides Chomsky? Because Chomsky is seen as so freaking left. I mean, he's off the scale, right?
and
So he
I'll say he's
immediately
old.
gets dismissed.
Yeah, and he's older. He's getting older, and he's not
And
as
he's in
active.
his 90s, yeah.
He's not as active. So the answer is no, and that's one of the problems. We don't have leaders. We don't have followers. We don't have. I mean, the people in the media are as strong, are the strongest names. Like I know that any of the people on MSNBC would be considered to be, um, you know, leaders in the sense that they have audiences that follow them. But are they? They're not political. They're not political in the sense that would they run for office? I mean, that usually is a next step for people who have media followings. They say, well, I mean, that was the whole thing with Donald Trump, The Apprentice, right? I
Right.
mean, having a media following meant, oh, I guess I can
And
run for
yeah,
president.
they believed it. They
They did.
believed that this guy was a successful businessman. It was all a sham. It was a show.
Yeah.
Okay. It was, what did people call it? They call it realism TV, reality
Reality
TV.
TV. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Reality TV. Well, this is
It's
where we are now.
unreality, man.
We
It's like,
elected a guy
what was the
twice.
the only show that got more followers or audience than The Apprentice was the Kardashians.
Yeah.
You know, where the hell are we in this society, man? Where the hell are we? Okay, that's what. And
Well,
then they're gonna get pissed off that I criticize the fact that they like to follow the Kardashians. They're gonna get pissed off because we. I'm telling them that The Apprentice was fake. Okay. Okay,
all right.
they
So
get pissed off when you say, "Well, WWF is fake, man." Okay, well, look at
we know that. We know it's fake and we like it. That's why
we like
politics.
it. Well,
Yeah, we
there's a
know
good
it's fake.
side. There's a good side to that, right? Because
Yeah.
it's good against bad, right? It's good against evil. It's nasty guys against good moral ethical people. That's good. Okay. Also, the other thing that I appreciate about it is it's very athletic, and it is every bit as dangerous as if it were real.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
It
yes.
is really a difficult thing to do. Okay,
To-
it's a very difficult thing to do. It's stunt action,
yeah.
without much protection.
Right.
So could you get hurt? Yeah, they get hurt all the time.
Yeah. Oh
You know?
yeah. All right. So Dan, to put a point on where we go, I guess we wait 14 days. Israel has the plan, and I don't know if we're going to have peace. I don't know if anyone's going to say, okay, we're ready for talks. I think it's going to run its duration, and
That's
it's
going
going
to
to
be very
dominate.
interesting. Yeah, Iran's remaining card. It all comes down to what their next attack or series of attacks looks like. But Israel is not going to be able to get to the enrichment center. Okay, the as far as we know, it is deep underground,
Yeah.
uh, at least a half a mile deep. It is not susceptible to bunker busters and all that. External armament. The only way you could get to it is maybe electronically. And only from the inside. Now, is that a possibility? Yes. Okay. If if Mossad was able to work the way they did successfully within the borders of Iran, I wouldn't put anything past them. Okay. That's one of the reasons. Here we have Mossad capable of doing what they just accomplished, and who knows what else is coming.
No.
Okay. And then I'm supposed to accept that they knew nothing about the October 7th attack in advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And how about
Remember when it first happened? On the next day after that attack happened, I said, I do not believe that Mossad didn't know this was coming. I do not believe that Israeli intelligence didn't know this
they?
was coming. And then people are saying they willingly sacrificed all these people. Yes,
Mm,
they would do that.
yeah. Well, it's a dirty business, right? Dirty business.
Uh, it is inhumane. These people are the next worst thing to. I mean, who needs vampire stories when you got people who are willing to sacrifice their own, like
This
these
is the
people here?
morality, modern morality. You see a movie like, have you seen Sinners yet? Have you seen that vampire movie? Oh, you should
No,
check out Sinners. It's because the good guys are the bad, become the bad guys, and the bad guys
of course,
eat the
yeah.
good guys, and then the good guys. Well, I know if they eat them, they suck their blood, and then it just makes you think about who's good, who's a sinner,
Yeah, and who are the
who the bloodsucker.
bloodsuckers? Metaphorically, who are the metaphorical
Yeah, and
bloodsuckers? And they're called people whose economic status starts with a
yeah,
B, and who were standing on the podium during the inauguration of the current
yeah,
president. That's who are the B
yeah.
bloodsuckers.
It's
Okay? And people were buying cars because they love the
yeah,
bloodsucker.
yeah. Well,
You know,
it just if you take the vampire metaphor, you can extend it to all the politics that we have today. All right, so we'll wait. We'll see what happens. Let's swish on. Uh, so,
well, we're all kind of sinners, man. We're all kind of sinners because all of us participate in some way or another
yeah,
in the
yeah,
capitalist system,
yeah.
and so we are directly and indirectly supportive, right? Whether or not we buy their
Yeah.
freaking
All right.
cars.
So
All
here's
right,
the thing about Israel and Iran. That story is just going to hover and shroud the world, and it's going to, yeah, it's going to
continuous.
make everything seem small. Like L.A. I mean, you've got world, you got the existential issues of the world happening in this, conflict between Israel and Iran. How important? I mean, the ice raids, protesting the ice raids are important, but the whole idea that you have national guard in LA makes it is even more ridiculous. The idea of having the Marines in LA more
Yeah,
ridiculous.
that last layer is really the worst indicator.
Of
That's really the worst
of
indicator because there is no. I want to see what the feds do, the federal courts do about that, adding that last
oh
layer.
yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Judge,
we saw what happened with
go ahead.
the National Guard. And the judge said they had to go. You can't federalize the National Guard. Then you have the appeals court say, hey, Trump can do what he does for now. Uh, and then you're right. I don't know who's going to sue about the Marines and whether he has
Yep.
the opportunity or if he's right to call the Marines. But it's considering the Israeli Iran thing, using sending troops into a 6 block area in LA for ice raids. I mean, the ice raids in you know what he does, what Trump does is he spreads around your areas of attack. Oh yeah, the ice raids are bad, but look, I've got the National Guard here. I got the Marines here, and there's all these things are he shouldn't do. They're bad, or the ice raids should be more under control. They shouldn't go after regular people in their workplaces. They should go after the bad guys if they're going after the bad guys.
That's what they said they were going to do. And remember, the person on the street questions were given to Latinos in
Yeah,
the streets and in their homes, and they said, "Well, Trump's only going after the criminals." And you and I spoke
yeah,
about that, and we said, "No, they're not.
yeah,
They're going to be coming after you." You know, and we did it incrementally. We said, "Okay, let's. How are they going to define who's criminal?" Okay, and the answer was, well, anybody who entered, they keep calling them
yeah,
illegal. Okay, we call them undocumented because we want to show that they're not illegal because even though they may have entered illegally, right, they have some kind of status that allows them to be present in American society while they either determine that they get an asylum
yeah,
status or that they get deported.
yeah,
Okay, and I have been a witness, an expert witness in asylum and deportation cases, and so I'm familiar with that process. very disappointed in it, especially during the Obama
Yeah.
administration, who had the highest level of
Yeah.
deportations in the history of American society. And that is the standard that now the Trump administration is trying to
Yeah.
compete
And
with. And they're
they're
failing.
failing because there's not that many illegals, undocumented, that have that criminal record. They're sweeping everybody. It's a numbers game. It shouldn't be a numbers game. It's a numbers game if you're trying to sell insurance. It shouldn't be a numbers game. It shouldn't be a numbers game for deportation, right? Where
Yeah.
let's sweep 1,000 here and maybe 10 are the bad guys. No, no,
Get your get your get your
yeah.
count up. This is like, people get ticked off because they believe, I think they have a
Yeah.
quota for
Oh,
citations
they do.
for drive
Yeah, they do. They do.
for traffic citations and for parking citations. I think they have a quota. And they do, but it's not a hard
Yeah.
quota. Essentially, they look at the month and they say, okay, here's the pattern over the years for how much we should be ticketing people, and it seems as though we're a little low right now.
Well, yeah.
So there's not a hard
So,
quota.
so Dan,
Okay.
how are we gonna get out of this? I mean, I guess with it. Well, wait, one
Uh,
thing.
it's called an
Oh yeah.
election,
Well, one thing that happened.
and it's
Yeah.
iffy.
One thing that happened yesterday also. Trump put out a thing on social media. And he said, "Oh, I'm for the farmers. I'm not for the work.
Oh yeah,
I'm for the
that's right.
farmers."
He did an
Yeah.
interview. He did a quick
Yeah,
interview.
and if he's for the farmers, he says it almost sounds like, oh, we're not going to raid and keep your workers from helping the farmers. So now it's unclear just how aggressive Stephen Miller is going to be, because essentially what Trump did was he put on the brakes and said that we're going to help the farm. They can't arrest everybody. So
And well, he actually echoed the coverage on NBC that included interviews of a farmer in Key
oh
West,
yeah, yeah,
right, who lost 6 of his employees, who were detained by
yeah,
ICE, and the guy, almost in tears, said, "These they're not just our workers. These people we've known for a minimum of 10 years. Some of the people have been with us for 15,
right.
20
These are our
years, and
friends.
they have." And what did he say? They have a level of skill that you cannot replace. You can't just go out on the street and hire people to do their jobs as well as these people have
Yeah,
done them. They have skills that are not easily replaceable. Well, you know what my answer is? You can't find white people that can do
yeah.
that
Well,
work.
they
You know,
that's what the way Trump looks at it, and unfortunately, what Red America is finding is that, can you support Donald Trump and his draconian measures? That
hey, they got to get out there in the fields and
yeah,
work. The people going to come after brown folks. They're coming after Senegalese now, who are refugees from, and they're who's getting so told. Didn't they just get told
yeah,
last night? You got to
yeah,
leave. Just within the last 24 hours, they come out with a new list, right? That says not only are we not accepting people who want to come here from these countries, these are banned countries, okay? Okay. We want the people who are here that are from these countries to go back where they came from. And you're going to tell me that this is not a racist
yeah,
device, that this is not a racist political leadership,
yeah,
that they are not representative of a substantial portion of American
yeah.
population.
It's funny. Every time they use race in policy, but whenever the left or whenever media points out the race issues, right wing media goes all crazy. Like, oh, they always want to make race into an issue. It's not. Of course, it's about race. I mean, and I want to talk about. And let's talk about Alex Padilla, the sender, right? Someone
Okay.
asked,
It's about that was about race
yeah,
and class. That was about race
and
and
but you
class.
know what? There was a question that Aaron Burnett asked him yesterday. That is it because of the way you look? Because he's, he's
Yes.
brown. He didn't look like a senator necessarily. Well, what does a senator look like, right? And I mean, senators could be, Cory Booker, could be, uh, Schumer, could be, there aren't that many black senators. There are some, I guess, also Brooks or the new senator from Maryland, but a few blacks, few Latinos. It was important that Alex Padilla was appointed by uh, by Gavin Newsom. But Alex Padilla, 52 years old, relatively young, smart engineer, went to MIT. People wouldn't know that ordinarily if they didn't know his back. His mother was a housekeeper. His father was a short order cook. You know, like my dad. So I relate to Alex Padilla. I know exactly how when someone asks him a question, do you think that you were treated the way you were because they just looked at what
Yeah,
you looked
there it
like,
is. There
and
it is.
who's this guy? Who's this farm worker dude?
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that. He's also a big guy.
Oh yeah, he's big. Yeah,
So he's an imposing figure physically. I don't you don't really know that until you see him in a crowd, until you see him around other people, and
I've
he's an
seen him. Yeah,
imposing figure, and so that's why it took three security people to push him out of the room, right? And then it took a fourth to cuff him, right?
yeah.
And
Well,
right,
what Padilla said. Uh, if this and it's the takeaway. If this happens to me, I'm a senator. This can happen to you. And every
and what was the
success.
lie? The big lie was he didn't identify himself.
Oh, he did. Yeah, but he did.
Okay, and so what's the lie behind that lie? You don't know what the senators look like,
Yeah.
and you like to tout the fact that you were in Congress and that
Hey,
you know these people, you know.
hey, the
Well, you didn't
senators,
know that one.
the senators are all white. Come
Yeah,
on. The senators. There are no brown
yeah,
senators.
and the ones that are not white are kind of wimpy. They're not
Yeah.
big guys like that,
So
They're
so
not big
here's the
burly folk. I mean, they're supposed to look like Andy Kim.
Andy Kim. Yeah, glasses, Asian.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but I thought.
they're supposed to. If they're Latino, they're supposed to look like Gallego, right?
Yeah,
They can't be big like this dude. This dude big, man.
Gallego. Yeah, he's and here's the thing: Gallego, Harvard,
Yeah,
Padilla, MIT.
yeah,
All
yeah.
these
Engineer.
guys,
That's right.
and
Masters too. Yeah.
they're not necessarily true for Gallego's fairly outspoken. Padilla is known for being very soft spoken,
Yes, he
and
is.
for him to do what he did, just to say, "Hey, I've got a question," he should have been recognized. And Christine Nome should have known the protocol. Oh, here's the sender. She could have been nice. Instead, she was like, I don't know. Maybe her lips got in the way. They were too puffed up.
No, her brain got in the way. Her
She can't,
brain got in the way. She can't think that fast.
no,
If
no, no.
it if it
She,
ain't scripted, man, it ain't happening. I mean,
yeah,
look it. She wrote happily about euthanizing her dog with a gun.
yeah,
Okay,
killing her
she
dog.
wrote happily about that. All right. So
Yeah.
what can you expect from a person who doesn't think that's going to be considered offensive by dog loving America? Right.
Dan,
Okay.
Dan, come on. She also lost her purse with $3,000 and a copy of the Constitution. Clearly, she doesn't know
Yeah,
doesn't
with a
know.
$100 bill as a marker, right?
Yeah,
on the First Amendment, right?
yeah.
On the Bill of Rights, right? So
Look,
I
if she were
read this
nice,
much, just
if
because
she
you
were,
had read it. Yeah,
yeah,
remember way back in it. Well, you were just a kid, but
what was
one
it?
of the things that people would use as an identifier of how radical you were, and therefore you should be adored. But when you went to the Fillmore Auditorium to watch, the best rockers in the world, the best
Yeah,
music in the world, right? That you should be welcomed by Bill Graham and everybody else that was cool, and
yeah,
was that you came dressed with army fatigues, right? Fatigue jacket, okay, a mouth button, and it had to be over the left side, right? Because you're
yeah.
lefty, okay. And in the fatigue jacket breast pocket was a small copy of Mao,
Wow,
Mao's
Chairman
thoughts,
Mao,
right?
quotations
The
of
thoughts of Chairman
Chairman
Mao.
Mao.
That's right, right.
Yeah,
That would get you in, and then you had to say all power to the people. Would know that
Well,
fits.
I
You
know.
have to do the
I
fits. You know.
yeah, did you get your military gear at Kaplan's Army Surplus on Market?
That's what a lot of people did. But
Yeah,
and then so the right wingers would say, look at these people, man, faking like they were, veterans, or they want to start a revolution. They're dressing like, in fatigues, and then, look at the Panthers with the black jackets and the leather and the berets and all that paramilitary stuff. Look at them. They're trying to destroy the society. And I said, yeah, those people didn't earn those jackets, right? And I said, wonder how come they have their name is like stitched on the. You ever notice that they got the name? That's a pretty good indication that they were in the military. You idiot.
yeah,
Okay, they were in the military. A whole lot of people that were in the Panthers, that were
yeah.
in the BSUs, right, all over the country, Black Students Union,
Lexington,
were
yeah,
were military who came out of Nam, who survived
yeah,
Nam. Okay, so you
yeah.
did not have anybody who were better speakers about the Nam experience, the Vietnam War experience, that knows Black men and women. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
but were they credible? Hell no. In the American public's eye, they were not credible. Okay, even after Apocalypse Now
yeah.
showed the reality, right?
Well, Dan, tell me a little bit about your thoughts about where Alex Padilla goes after. I mean, he's now gone from outspoken or soft-spoken senator to now the face. He's the face of, for every person of color who has achieved and overachieved. This is the moment that you wait for. You know that because you know it's going to
Okay.
happen. You know it's
I
going to
think
happen.
I think you raise a great point. That's a
Yes.
great
Wait,
point.
wait. Let me finish. You know that someone's going. You know it's going to happen where someone's going to doubt you belong, and you got to say I belong, but he gets cuffed. That's why he's kind of a hero to
Yes,
people
he is a
like.
hero. He is.
Yeah, to people like you who went to law school and then and then taught for years and were at SF State. For a kid like me, I mean, I have a father who's a short order cook. I went to Harvard. All these people, and he's younger than me. I'm from a generation before, and so we're in the it's sort of like similar to the Russian dolls. There's always another doll. They're like beneficiaries of the society. We're all on each other's shoulders, and so
Yeah.
he's up there on. He's up. I sense he's up there on my shoulders,
Well,
and
we all
he gets
supported him.
cuffed.
He,
He's cuffed.
he- we all supported him, and the reason Padilla happened, right, is because he's in California.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
reason Padilla happened all the way across the board. Okay, California was leading the way in terms of actually incorporating casual forms of affirmative action across the board. Right,
mhm,
we didn't wait around for that. We started doing it informally. Right, without that heavy policy. And then came the hardcore policies. Originally from the federal level, right? Because
yeah, yeah,
they were extensions of the Civil Rights Act. So after the Civil Rights Act, right, is signed and it becomes effective in '65, people forget that because the Civil Rights Act was effective, people had expectations of a greater degree of equality. Something happening, right, after that great document was signed
yeah,
that would signal the beginning of real change. But
yeah.
it didn't happen. And so the hot summer of '65, remember all of the cities that were going up,
Oh yeah.
and that's the first time that central LA went up in flames. And so people only go back to Rodney King or something like that.
Oh, you got to go back to '65. Yeah, you
Yeah,
got to go back to the Kerner report,
yeah.
Kerner
And
Commission.
so once again, America is missing out on that history, and the way that the plan is now with the banning of books and the banning of everything that is called DEI. Look where it went. CRT was
Yeah,
was what they were using as the banner. We're against CRT because it's teaching our kids to hate. It's making white people feel what? Like racist? Well, guess what?
yeah. Well,
you
it's true.
you are racist, you
It's
stupid
true. Yeah.
bugger.
No. Well. So this is the thing about Padilla. He's now become this figure, but where does
What
it
can you
go?
do? You're
Because
saying, yeah, he could go forward. I think you're right, but here's the problem. All right, I agree with you. First of all, I'm going to say, you're bringing up a wonderful point. I hope he has the right kind of advisors, right, to give him yes and no on what he can go forward with. But he can become the voice, right, rather
yeah,
than Gavin Newsom, who's always going to get shot down, right,
yeah,
uh, and he is suffering from being shot down now because he dared to have interviews with right wingers like Steve Bannon, right?
yeah,
And I thought that was daring, and he wasn't trying to say that I'm moving to the middle. He's
yeah,
saying I'm willing to communicate with people no matter how far you push them out.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
and so he is suffering from that internally. There's going to be a lot of people who see him as a threat because he's so telegenic, right? I mean, the dude just looks good, sounds good, right? On TV, all the
yeah,
hot media, okay? And but he's been very strident. And now we have the normally soft-spoken Padilla being reasonable,
yeah,
okay? And just wanting to ask a question and then being victimized by race and class, right?
yeah. And
Disguised as authority and dignity of office, right? You
yeah,
you buy Chris, the
Chris,
former governor Nome, I
yeah,
call her Numb,
no,
but
yeah,
yeah, you buy that she has authoritative strength, that
no,
that
but
she has. She doesn't even have constitutional strength. She
she
could.
should have.
She said that the Fifth Amendment did what?
Yeah,
That it gave the president powers, certain powers, right? And she gets corrected from the congressional hearing, saying
yeah.
no, wrong on that. Next contestant,
Yeah, no,
please.
but the thing is, she just needed to be better with her people skills, and she was there in her egotistical. Here I got my lips, I got my hair
Yeah,
extension, I got the
got my
filler.
hair. I
You
got
know,
the
I,
whole thing going.
I'm camera ready. Hey,
Yeah.
why are you pointing the cameras at that brown guy?
Yeah.
Hey, right here, camera on me. Yeah, don't not on that big brown guy. And then and you see that she didn't break. She didn't break to say
No, she just
who is
kept talking. She kept
yeah
on
who
trying to
is this
say what
man?
she was scripted to
Yeah,
say. Yeah.
and then like
Which was going to be about LA and bringing in the troops, right? And she rationalized that all the way. And she says he has the perfect rights. He got Speaker Johnson, right? Gets up and says he's completely correct in his assertion of these powers. He has these rights. And people say, where does these rights exist from the Constitution? And they can't point to anything, right? They
yeah
can't. There's no answer for that because it doesn't exist, you idiots.
yeah
Okay, Hegseth, he's absolutely in Congress, in their faces, says
yeah.
he absolutely has the power. Okay, where the hell is that? God, please, man, American public, get a brain for God's sake.
Okay, all
Read
right.
the damn Constitution yourselves. It ain't that long a document.
It's not that long a document, and I'm not going to insult the American public. I think they have a brain. They may not use it. You're saying they should buy one or rent one or lease one or get one. I think they have one. I think they have one. They just may not use it.
Well,
So,
then it's
so
in disuse.
yeah. So Dan, what happens? The
He's
shroud
got
of
to go.
Israel.
If I were, I would encourage him to go forward and do a roadmap. Say this is what we're going to do. Okay,
Yeah,
this may not be a democratic platform. I would come out and say that. Look, I'm not going to tell our party leadership what the hell they should do. Okay,
yeah,
but this is what I think we should do. Okay,
yeah.
this is just my opinion. This is just
Yeah,
where I think we ought to go, and I think you ought to outline the stuff and say this is what we've done. This is what we've tried to do, and don't forget, right? He's been one of those guys, along with Gallegos, right, who said, "Look, don't forget, we agreed to a new plan for immigration, and they voted it down.
yeah. He
One of
was
their own
forceful.
was cooperative in the process of drafting this new policy with new action that could have been voted up. We could have avoided all of this stuff and they voted it down.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You don't hear any discussion right now, while these ICE raids are on, of Republicans trying to make things better, trying to fix
Yeah,
the law
where's
because
the policy?
yeah, that's passed. All right, so
Yeah,
Padilla,
no, they're all they're doing is rationalizing what is happening. And one last thing on Padilla,
yeah,
okay, that is they're going to say he's they got a choice, right? MIT, he's just another elitist.
yeah, they'll say that. Yeah.
You know,
Well,
you
look,
gotta, either that or he's just a DEI. Okay,
yeah,
he didn't get in because he got in because he's big and brown. He got
yeah,
in exactly because he's the son of working class people, right? And
yeah,
so DEI says, what you got to give working class people a leg up, right? Just and not only because of their class, but because of their color. So he's got two things in his favor, right?
yeah.
That make
Well,
him
yeah,
into an elitist.
yeah. It's just like Bonta did some good things this week, going to
Oh
court.
man.
And this is the thing about Bonta's. He's learned to not smile that big toothy smile anymore. That makes him look like Bugs Bunny.
Oh
Yeah,
man, have you
yeah,
been? Have you been? Oh, you never saw my Twitter stuff. I was, Dean Graffilo. You know Dean,
yeah, yeah,
but he's one of my really early. I don't know. He's one of the late '80s, early '90s students. He graduated from state and then went on to get a master's, and his wife did too. And she teaches. She's a teacher. Anyway, they're really good friends. One of the great things about being a teacher is that your former students, they really, some of them turn out to be your really close friends. And so when when Bonta was clearly going to make it, into the attorney general position and all that stuff, and I was talking to Dean about it, and he said, "Yeah, he's great. He's smart. He's smarter than me. I mean, I came up with really good ideas, and then he would, check me on them, and I always felt a little diminished because he's so smart." And I said, "Yeah, well, he's got to calm that smile down." And I used exactly the words you just used. I said, "Cheshire cat,"
yeah.
and Dean went silent on me, man. I think I insulted Bonta
Well,
through him, right?
the thing about Bonta, he's sort of like Padilla in a sense.
Well,
Uh,
see, I was hoping. See, there's the problem, right? You got all these people that are new. Well, Padilla's experienced now. He's the elder statesman, right? He's the senior senator for the
yeah,
state of California. But
yeah,
what do you got, right? You got people who are next in line in terms of their seniority into those senatorial positions. So they're occupied,
yeah.
okay? But that would have been an ideal spot for Bonta to go,
Yeah,
okay?
Bonta. Well, people were talking about the governorship, but
Governorship?
now,
No, man. I mean, that was mentioned, but he knew that that wasn't a good idea. Whoever was advising him has got it right, okay?
yeah,
Because
well,
there's other
Harris,
people who are going to be in contention, and
yeah,
the Democratic Party is going to favor that seniority.
yeah.
That's the way party politics goes. But
Well,
is
and
he great? Is he doing a great job as he is? Hell yes. He's
yeah,
one of the. I think he's the best freaking AG in the country at this
well,
point.
he's got the leading, fourth largest economy, so he makes the case for tariffs. He's made the case for these LA, the overreaction of the military or overreaction of the administration. Although now that we have this, here's a move checked by the judges, checked by the Court of Appeal. I guess it goes up to the Supreme Court, right?
It might. It might. Right now, I think they're gonna. I think on Tuesday, either a tribunal or,
The ninth, yeah,
the whole panel. Right? Yeah,
you know,
the Ninth
on bank,
Circuit. Yeah, will
on
on
bank.
down. Will make with all of the judges of the Ninth Circuit, and I don't know how that is. I haven't been really careful and
Yeah.
specific about
Well,
how that bank looks. Okay, but I would say that it's probably close to 50-50. So
yeah,
there's a likelihood that they could agree with this, with allowing Trump's use of both the National Guard and the freaking Marines.
yeah,
And what
and
is that? So So see, here's the cool thing: if they decide in his favor, right,
Mm.
and then it doesn't go up to the Supreme Court.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay. So until the AGs get together and say, okay, no, we're going to appeal. It could be up to Bonta. Bonta could say, no, we're going to appeal this to the Supreme Court. Now, I don't know. I'd be cautious about that because the last decision went 6-3 against, right? You
yeah.
know, I will call it the traditional conservative lineup of 6-3 happened. Okay, so they're inclined in that direction. Now, what happens after that is if there are bigger demonstrations, and remember the biggest demonstrations in Seattle were the WTO demonstrations. Remember those?
Right, right. A couple years ago, yeah.
And
More than a couple years ago. Those are like big. The WTO. Those.
huge, huge.
Yeah,
Even touched Portland. Okay,
yeah,
so Portland. So that means that the whole West Coast has at some time or another within the last 10 years, right, been the scenes of big cities in the West Coast have been the scenes of major protests that lasted many days, and with
yeah.
Seattle being one of the longest. I mean, they took over a whole section of the city,
Yeah,
right?
1999. Oh, 2003. 2003. Or no, bless you. There, you okay? 2003. There were big ones. Um,
Right, right. Yeah, those that was that big
well, that
one.
was in Cancun. That was in Cancun. See, where's Seattle? See, Seattle's in the 90s, I
There was
think.
what there was one in Portland just a few years ago. It
Yeah,
was pre-COVID
Seattle,
though. It was pre-COVID.
2019. See, 1999. That was a big one in
That was
Seattle.
the biggest one. That was
Yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Which
So
which year was it when they took over that section of the city and they had their own rules?
I think
They
it was.
tried to establish essentially local law.
I don't remember.
Anyway, okay. So
Was it?
my point is that all that stuff is happening now. This is even bigger, right? This is even bigger because people are feeling it on the ground at home. They're
Yeah,
seeing their neighbors get taken. They're seeing schools being invaded by these clowns. You
yeah.
know, they're and then how are they doing it? They're doing it masked with no ID, no perceptible. We don't. You don't know. You don't even know. You know how dangerous that is for the general public. There could
Oh
be
yeah.
fools out there doing kidnapping right now.
Well,
Okay, you
so
don't know who the
what?
hell they are.
Yeah, and so what is the impact of Iran, Israel, all that taking attention? We're probably not going to hear about the bad stuff that'll be happening. That'll continue to be happening, or will Trump and his folks say, "Well, we're not going to get the attention, so we can lighten up a little bit." You know,
No,
is this?
no, what you got to remember what an egomaniacs are like, right? They don't
Oh
like
yeah,
anybody making them look bad, and the protests make them look bad. And if the protests get larger, okay, then that means how he's all conscious about crowd size and all that stuff.
yeah, yeah,
When
yeah,
you see large populations come out and you see them coming out all over the country, which I suspect is going to happen, particularly tomorrow,
yeah, yeah,
okay, because it's his birthday.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about No King's Day. I mean, the protests are out. It's counter to the big military parade that Donald Trump is having. Most people, it's going to cost something like 42 million or dollars or more, counting all the other ancillary costs. But the army's going to march, unlike they've never done it before in Washington quite in this way. It also is Trump's birthday, and as a personal note, it's the day my father died. So I feel kind of drawn to some kind of comparison, the coincidence of this all. But tell me about, all right, Donald Trump. He says in the news, "I'm not a king. I'm not a king." That's what he
But
says.
that's the reason he's saying that is because the movement has labeled itself the No Kings movement.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then he has to come out with an opposing position, and obviously it has to mention the word king, which he himself has mentioned, about himself. Okay,
Yep. Maybe
so
it's just the no Trump, no trying to make it sound like bridge. No Trump movement. No Trump. No Trump.
no Trump, no Trump
Yeah.
the Trump. But this has done several things,
Mm.
and I'll tie it in with L.A. So what is the right doing? They're saying L.A.'s burning, right? Because Trump said L.A.'s burning, okay, and it wasn't, okay. Uh,
Wednesburg.
the the space that has been under curfew, right, is less than a mile square. It's according to most of the reports that I see, it's less than a quarter of a mile square. Okay, that's what's under curfew. Okay, and so they're busting people who are within that area after 8 o'clock and before what 6 a.m. or something. Uh, And so that means that people who work there and might want to get there early, right? Especially custodian, people come early and clean up just before the main group comes in.
Mhm.
They got to get checked in and all that. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is pretty much normal LA. And that's what all of the Angelinos are saying, man. You know, that's a specific area, and you only go to that area because you want to conduct a certain kinds of business. Okay. And so
Yeah.
you don't have that, you're not there. so so it's the rest of LA, and you and I both know LA really big, man.
Yeah. It's like,
And it's a pain in the ass, man, to get from one section of LA to the other. Even
yeah.
if you use the freeway, it's a pain in the butt, right?
Yeah.
They have off ramps designed personally by Satan himself.
Yeah. Although although the traffic around Sacramento between 50 and 80 and 5
Oh
and
yeah.
99,
Oh.
that's pretty bad too.
Oh yeah.
But
And you
but
can you can make a mistake that throws you off by 5 miles, man. You can.
in Sacramento, no, Sacramento like 10 or 15 miles. 10 or 15.
Oh
If
yeah.
there's road work, but
Hey man, I made the mistake of saying, nah, I think I go wait. I had to, I was thinking, do I go to the bathroom now or do I wait? And
yeah,
so I was coming in towards Roseville and I thought, okay, I can wait, right? And then all of a sudden I realized, Jesus, it's nothing but divided highway from here on in, and there's nothing over here on the right.
yeah,
Why is that, right? And it's populated, right? But there's
yeah,
just no place to get off,
yeah,
It's so it's really frustrating. It's like, wait
yeah,
a minute, how do I get the hell out of here? No, you're absolutely right, man.
yeah.
I,
Anyway, so
okay. So
what's
LA
gonna
is going to do that, right? And then they're going to do this parade. Okay, so now he's going to use the military in two different directions. One of
yeah,
them is to quell whatever these demonstrations do that are going to be anti-king, right? The no
yeah,
kings demonstrations, right? Because he's going to back up. Okay, on a Saturday when there ain't no business in the federal buildings anyway, he's going to send military in to back up National Guard people who already are just standing there.
yeah,
Okay. Okay,
yeah,
so that's the plan. That's the plan, right? And then he's going to have
yeah.
the other part of the military, particularly the army, right, parading and chewing up DC streets. I can't wait to
Yeah.
see what
Oh,
the hell that's like.
they got money. They got money set aside to fix the streets afterwards. But what about the division? So there's a division between the military about
Yeah,
what?
so they got money. What's that like when we fix freeways here in the Bay Area? I just coming back from Fairfield last night.
Yeah.
They narrowed 5 down to 2.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was
Okay,
coming
and,
back.
and so it took like an hour to get into town. Okay,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
cool. It was peaceful. There were no idiot. The nice thing is they can't do 90. You can't do over 100. When everybody is stuck on the bridge, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the problem with 5. Everyone thinks they can do 90 on
Oh yeah,
5 generally,
sure.
and
Oh,
that's why I like to do 99 because
me too. Me
you
too.
can't do
I
99
did.
on
I
the
do
time.
too. Except for the fact that they did that. They were doing all of that work. That improvement work around Modesto,
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
Modesto and
Oh,
Fresno.
down. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
terrible. That
I
stuff
think
was terrible.
there's still some, but
It,
there's
a little bit.
now there's more up north toward Lodi and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
wreck
yeah. They're
that.
they're moving towards Sacramento, but yeah, that
Yeah.
was awful, and it lasted forever. Not as
Yeah.
bad as Fremont.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh yeah.
They were doing Fremont for. I think people could have kids go to college. Be born and go to college.
Yeah.
With that work on Fremont continuing through that whole period, man, it's
Okay.
crazy.
Hey, listen. Yeah, don't tell me about that. I had a job driving when they were fixing 280. Yeah, that goes when they're building 280. That's how far back I go. Hey,
Oh yeah.
so Dan,
Okay,
the
now
parade. Are you
so
going to
the
honor?
parade.
Do people go to No Kings? No
Yeah.
Kings Day?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. They should go to No Kings. Okay. And I would mask up. I mean, we're not going to go because I don't want to. I don't want to be in a big crowd. I'm not into that. But yeah, I'm supporting No Kings and all the rest of that. So I think people should go. Okay. The other thing I was going to say is
Mm,
Trump has already divided the military.
yeah.
How could you possibly have uniformed red beret troops listen to his speech, right? Against all tradition, against all tradition. So he made a politicized speech at West Point,
Mhm.
and he made a politicized speech, right, in front of those troops. He also he added an exclamation point and terminated his speech with, "And I'm going to rename all of these forts that were renamed because they had been named for civilian for Civil War people who were convicted as traitors, including Robert E. Lee, right? And I'm going to
Right,
name them all back, okay?
right. He renamed all the places.
And they're going to dename, Harvey Milk's ship,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you
It
know.
was just a supply ship.
Jesus, yeah.
So so
These
so
guys,
people they're upset in the military.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Why are they upset?
I was upset when I first heard that they were renaming Robert E. Lee, but then or Harvey Milk, but Robert E. Lee, I didn't know they'd go that far. I mean, I thought with Harvey Milk they'd say, oh, well, he's just an obscure LGBTQ guy, But Robert E. Lee is not obscure, and
No, the
his
real
sins.
reason they didn't want to, they wanted it renamed because they don't want it named after a homosexual. That's the real
Right,
reason.
right. Of course, that's an LGBTQ thing.
Yeah, well, let's just come out and say it. That's
An
so.
anti-LGBTQ thing, and the Robert E. Lee thing is just like I said, nothing is obscure about his sins.
I
But
think a lot of people in the military, and I haven't spoken to my favorite sources yet today, but I will as soon as we're done.
yeah,
Uh, they I think they're really upset because this was such a violation of tradition, and that it encouraged people to show favoritism towards Trump, not because he's president, but because he's Trump.
yeah,
And that was really bad. The character assassination that he committed in that speech was 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 bad enough. But then to have those guys cheer and whistle, okay, and jeer against Governor Newsom and others, right? That was really bad. And I think there is a division in the military, but unfortunately, I think the division is pro-Trump. I think that
yeah,
that a lot of the people in the military have a tendency to be favorable towards Trump because of who and what Trump is, not because he's president of the United. Don't give me that as your cover,
yeah.
because he is an absolutely traitorous person. Uh, Absolute violations of the Constitution of the United States of America. So you like that guy? As far as I'm concerned, you are a pro-traitorous person. I cannot trust you. I cannot trust you. I sure as hell don't want you with a gun.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing about Trump. You cannot trust Trump to for what he says about anything. I mean,
The guy's
uh,
an maniacal person. Okay,
yeah,
first and foremost, and that you do not want egomaniacal people in positions of leadership, and you certainly don't want them to be holding a gun. And I have to rely on you as a member of my team to keep me alive
yeah,
under the worst of circumstances. You know,
yeah.
and and you're acting like this. Can I trust you?
Well, that's what the American public, when they're paying attention, needs to ask themselves. I mean, that's the thing. We're hardly paying attention. to all this. And then when something happens, it's too late. They say, well, why didn't anyone tell me about this?
They
Hey,
did.
Dan. Well, thank you. Go to a New Kings rally, mask up. It's the opposing viewpoint, and they're loosely associated. All the Three Kings rallies around the country, so you don't have to go to Washington. You don't have to go to one central point. They're all kind of linked together.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm hoping that that those lines of communication remain fluid, right? And that they're factual, that they do not allow themselves to fall victim to the my kung fu is better than your kung fu
yeah.
syndrome.
Hey, are we going to see violence? Are they going to send
Well,
send mass
there are
rebellion?
provocateurs. I mean,
No.
once again, 60 and 70 years ago, what was the right saying? That these people aren't even real protesters or
Yeah.
anything. They're
Outside,
paid provocateurs. They're agent provocateurs. They're
out,
communists.
outside agitators, and so
Outside,
we're
that was a
just
great phrase.
yeah
Outside agitators.
we're seeing the phrase relive.
Well, and to be completely honest with you, I believe that there were some people that were in fact outside agitators, just as I believe that there were people among our ranks that were snitches,
Yeah,
that were paid informants. You
yeah.
know,
I mean, back in your day.
yes.
But today, I think also there are
Oh
some
yeah,
paid.
no. Well, I'm making the comparison. I'm
Yeah,
saying, what happened then happens now,
yeah,
and when I say those things, it catches our audiences when I get asked to participate in panels, and they expect us to talk about what about the past, right? And our experience is applicable today. Okay, and when I come up with a statement, I said only about maybe 20%.
yeah,
Only about 20% is applicable, and it's almost generic, the things that are
yeah.
applicable,
Well,
because the world has changed so much. You
yeah,
got George Clooney doing Murrow and on Broadway, and it brings up the reality of the past, where you had three major networks, and they did not there was not a lot of difference between what they saw as the facts.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
There may be some critical interpretation of the facts, right? But some most of the time it took it into the intellectual level. The Saturday morning and the Sunday morning shows, particularly the Sunday morning shows, were just excellent ways of discussing those kinds of issues, and they made historical comparisons. Right? They talked about the problems in Israel. They talked about Central America. They talked about all of the hot spots all over the world, and you had to be paying attention. The newspapers did a good job.
yeah,
I remember reading the newspaper in the World Affairs section, and it said Laos, and I said, Laos, where the hell is Laos? I think I was around 9 or 10 years old, so I went and looked it up, and I said, oh, it's borders Vietnam and Cambodia, and that's
secret
how I
war.
learned about the beginnings of what was going to happen in Vietnam, right?
Yeah,
Um, but that those common sets of factors were not in question. Now we don't know what the hell common. You have to have grounding, right, in world history, and
yeah.
some confidence in understanding that stuff and caring about it. Conscious. You have to be conscious about it, right? I,
Well, look,
you know,
there's
but
people are there. They're inside, but they're not conscious about it. They'd rather
yeah.
representative government let someone else do it. Unfortunately, I think that's the
Well,
worst
and
part.
well, okay. And the other side of that, in terms of vulnerability, is why would they allow people like Trump to gain high office? And it's because they think anybody can do government.
Yeah,
There's not special skills, there's not special knowledge, there's not a need for particular kinds of experience to do government. Okay? Look at the people who said we got to get a businessman in there because they
yeah,
think you can run government like a business, right?
yeah. No,
Uh, and
they can't.
and once again, the very limited perspective, very narrow perspective on how government actually runs, and
Yeah,
and they're only beginning to understand the value of government as they lose government services. So once again, what do we say? They have to suffer the loss. Okay, Now I got the American flag flying over here. The key to understanding why I do that is number one, we're in trouble. And this is the best time to say, I'm an American too. And I think you ought to be listening to the people that are protesting. That's one. Behind that flag is what appears to be a gray wall, right? Okay.
Mhm. Oh,
Yeah.
it's uh
It's
looks
the
like five.
pavement.
Oh, yeah, pavement, huh?
It's the pavement. It's the stone pavement on Wall Street
Ah, I didn't
in
know
New
that.
York. And some of the stones are punctuated by what's left of posts. The posts demarked the territory that was occupied by slaves as they were prepared to be marketed on a stand on Wall Street. Okay, so this is my reminder to Americans that that flag is based on those stones and the activity that went on there for more than 100 years. Okay, that's what that image is about. I took that picture maybe 20 years ago on one of my trips to DC.
Wow. Oh, that's a well. No King's Day tomorrow.
No kings, man.
Go out
No
there
slaves either.
and let your voice be heard. Be out there. All
All
right,
right,
Dan.
and yeah, celebrate your dad's death, his passing.
Well, it's just one of those
Yeah,
coincidences.
I think it brings back, our the passing of our own families and
Yeah.
our own parents. And I thank you for that. I do like to reflect on all the good things that they brought us. I mean, they made it possible for us to become who we are. And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
if Padilla is standing on our shoulders, we're standing on their shoulders, our parents.
exactly.
And it's just it's an ongoing thing, and it's and we're still fighting. We're fighting the same battles. It seems,
It
when
does, even though we have obviously with Padilla in office, and a younger generation of people like Gallegos
yeah,
and some of the people on the Andy Kim, some of the people
yeah,
on the East Coast, and even in a couple of places in the Midwest. We've got a new generation knocking at the door. I think one of the things that we might want to talk about, depending on what's happening this next week, is obviously there's going to be a lot of reaction to this weekend, this
yeah,
Saturday,
yeah.
and also
Well,
what's going on in Iran.
we'll
But
see if.
we need to talk about the shakeup in the DNC with
Oh yeah.
Mr.
Well,
Hogue.
I don't know. I mean, the Democrats are so weak. I think
Yep.
that Hogue. I mean, Hogue's a footnote, but he's trying to shake some things up. He's a young guy. He's breaking up the protocol. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. Some people think he's an opportunist. Some people think, oh, this is the kind of thing that the Democrats need. But I don't know. I don't know if the Democrats. I don't know what they stand for anymore.
And
Yeah, they're searching. Where's Kamala Harris?
well, she, whew, I think licking her wounds. I think
Yeah,
she's
I
still
know.
hurting. I
Yeah,
think she's still hurting. I still really appreciate her and the fact that she was willing to take this on. But unfortunately, the burden that was placed on her by her former boss
yeah.
was really
Right.
problematic. Now all of a sudden people are saying, well, what are you doing shitting on Biden? Man, I did not want him to run. I mean,
Yeah. Well, a
didn't
lot
we
of
talk
people.
about that? We talked about that when he
Yeah,
was running, and we said, he ought to be a one-term president, and you gotta. It's really important that he give the blessing to his vice president, whoever that is, and
yeah.
then that they should run, and then we talked about they should have a primary, right?
Well,
Remember that?
yeah. But these are all academic things. Going forward doesn't help, but uh, but it's interesting to see what mechanism in the party prevents people from going to a convention if need be, in a certain
Well, see,
circumstance.
I thought our point was okay. Well, my point now in citing those things that they coulda, woulda, shoulda, right, is that they evidently haven't learned from it, because you got to move out of that. You can't sit there and think that you can use old strategies that worked 40 years ago, 30 years ago, or even 20 years ago. You can't do that. You have to think out of the box. Hogg was thinking out of the box, maybe a little too extreme, right? Because what's wrong with saying we got to be careful about who we boast for primaries?
Well,
There's nothing wrong with that. But what he said was we're going to put money into people to run against folks that are maybe more established people in line, right, with
um,
seniority in the Democratic Party. And
so
he's
that
saying screw seniority. Let's just get the best people we can find, put them in there, okay? And that was too much. That was too
well,
much.
that's always been the case between the young guy who wants to push the old guy out. Happened in Hawaii, Akaka, wanting to get put. He was in there, and Ed Case wanted to push him out. Happened here, Mike Honda, Rokana wanted to push him out. I mean, it happens. But
Mike. I like Mike personally. I knew him pretty well. I like Mike, but he wasn't doing as much as he could.
I,
And
I, I think that there was a little of that, but it's still he had seniority, which is the magic word in
yeah,
Congress,
yep.
and he had the backing of all the mainstream powerful
Yes. And
Democrats.
that's exactly my point. That you can't just rely on seniority anymore. You got to go with the
No.
people who are willing to make strides. Okay,
Well, let
and that's what the American people want. They want a leadership, and they want a party that is willing to make strides. And and
well,
and we tried to do that. The Democrats tried to do that under Biden, right?
no,
But they were hampered by the fact that they didn't control Congress.
yeah,
Once they lost control of Congress, just like with Obama in his first term, they had a
mm,
good year and a half, right, where they could have done stuff. And what did they go with? They went with healthcare.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, all right. Look, Dan, I'm just saying. Look, seniority still works if you're behind. If the issues that you're behind get the push from the seniority. But I think the problem is if you don't have it, you don't get very far. You
Well,
don't.
they don't. But they don't have either.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
a problem. Man. You got to
if you
have.
get but if you've got young people that do have ideas and that can formulate policy, then you ought to let them do it. Okay, you ought to let
Well,
them do it. You ought to encourage them to do it. I think that's true of all of the institutions, dude.
yeah.
Okay, it's
Well,
not just
I
about
think.
Democrats and Republicans. It's not just about conservatives and liberals.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, right? The liberal thinking, conservative thinking, whether or not it follows the party patterns, patterns rather. Okay,
Mm,
the partisan party patterns. Wow,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
hard. But anyway, that was challenging. Whether or not it does that, it actually occurs. That those kinds of politics occur within all of our institutions. And
Yeah.
so what I'm
No,
saying is, there's times, man, when I'm looking at the well ensconced now senior elements, and I've just left right as a senior
yeah.
element,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
sure there were people among my younger generation professors, my colleagues, that said, "Boy, am I glad that son of a bitch is gone." Right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but for what reasons? Was it for good reasons? Was it be good for the institution, or was it good for them? Okay,
I know. Well, you need
personally,
well.
individually,
That's the balance on both sides. On both sides, that's the balance.
yeah,
Because some people think the old people are hanging on there for their self-aggrandizement,
yeah.
when it's the young people who want their self-aggrandizement. So it's like that. Like Rokana, that's how I saw him pushing out Honda. Honda may not have been doing the job as well as he could have, but now here's Rokana
Well, that's the
thinking,
reason he was. That's the reason he was susceptible.
yeah, and then but here's Rokana was a moderate. Now he's progressive. Now he's not a progressive. I don't know what he is now. And
No, he's
so,
he's in between the moderate and progressive thing. They all do that. They do that dance. So
yeah,
it's
it's,
like,
it's called opportunist.
yeah.
He's an opportunist,
Well,
and I've always called him that.
yeah, but everybody. Look, now we're bringing it back down to what kind of personality wants to run for office, and all of it is a balance between ego and opportunism, right? And service. Okay,
All right,
and
so
and so they rationalize what they're going to do and why they're running. Okay, as a call to serve. Okay, that's how they rationalize it. But the reality is that they're just saying that, and the question then becomes how much of it is really about rank opportunism and individual interest.
Right.
That's what
And
it is.
that's why it's based on your own individual scale, and he tips the scale toward opportunism.
There you
Okay.
go.
All right. So Dan, we
Yes,
gotta
sir.
go. I gotta go.
Okay.
But thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah. Well,
Spirited
thanks for having
discussion.
me. Thanks for having me. I'm glad you tolerate my, my
No. Spirited
antics.
discussion as always. Let's see what happens with Israel. And some people are just saying, let's find out more. And some people say, if you're so inclined, pray. But I don't know. I don't
Sure.
know.
Well, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't
Doesn't hurt.
hurt. I think you just need to do more than pray.
Yeah.
You need to
Action.
study. You need to take a position. You know,
Go to the
people, you
king.
got to do the work. Democracy takes work, man. You got to do
Yeah.
the damn
Oh, yeah.
work.
Got to do the King's Rally. King's Rally. No King's Rally. Wherever you are, check the
Read the
web.
freaking Constitution and understand that the man, in the Oval Office, is violating it by the minute.
Yeah, every day. There's like the first two rules or three rules. Showcases the branches of government. Article 1, Article 2, Article 3.
Yep.
And he's in violation of Article 1 all the time.
Yeah. He's a
All
violation of Article 2 too.
Article 2.
There's
Yeah.
a limitation. There's a limitation on his powers over the military, and he's acting like commander in chief is 24/7. Okay, okay. It's 24/7 in the sense that he has those powers. It's not 24/7 in the sense that he gets to run the military directly, right?
Yeah.
At will. Okay.
That's why he wants to be king. That's why he wants to be king.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
Dan.
he's achieved one rank, but it's spelled differently. It's K-I-N-K. He's kink. He's king.
King.
All
All
right,
right,
dude.
Dan. Hey, take care, Dan. There he goes, Daniel
Peace out.
Phil Gonzalez, my friend. We come together on Friday to discuss the news. Thanks for your insights, Stan. College of Ethnic Studies, Professor Emeritus, San Francisco State University.
Thank you, sir.
And that's it. There he goes. Dan Gonzalez. It was good. That's why I go short during the week, because I know on Friday if I have Dan on, he was good. He made some great points about Israel, great points about Padilla, great points about LA. Don't know what's going to happen with LA, but we're going to be watching. And if you're near a No Kings rally, go to a No Kings rally. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to be back tomorrow, just reading a poem, a Father's Day poem. So listen to this space, and you'll see it. I'll read it and I want to see what happens to that military parade. So I'll be checking that out. We like to close with a little loving kindness, because we're nice people. I met someone who was not that nice the other day. No, I won't say. But I read someone said the way to change your enemies is to make them your friend. So I was just being a friend, and I said, no, he's my enemy. No, just kidding. Love changes things. So we end our shows with a little loving kindness. We need it this weekend. So as I wish for you, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Hey, I'm not going to be on the shows on Laughs Unlimited in Olsac this weekend, but check them out. Some good comics that I know are in this competition, the World Series of Comedy. Go to VIPtickethub.com/unlimited tickets. You can go there live, get tickets at a big discount. Use the code GIVE. Say Emil Amok sent you, and then that's a good way to see some up and coming comedians. Some I know. They're there Friday and Saturday. Saturday's the finals. World Series of Comedy, Laughs Unlimited, Ulsac. And if you can't go there live, you can see the live stream. Just go to VIPTicketHub.com/unlimited tickets for Laughs Unlimited. All right, that's it. Emil Amok here. Till next time. Mahal Gita.